I'm Tony I go to Leeds Trinity University. I'm doing a placement here. So I've just got just a few questions. Just to start, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and the Self Leadership Initiative?
Yep, so the Self Leadership Initiative is a training provider, and I work with anybody who'll have me. Mostly, I started out in youth work, so I worked a lot with young people on their leadership development and kind of going into the world of work employability skills. And then as I've matured and as I've kind of gone into the world of work, realized actually lots of adults need this stuff as well. So I now work with managers. I do a lot of work with teachers. I also work with refugees, basically doing soft skills development. And hopefully, as we know, soft skills are actually really difficult and need a lot of honing and kind of developing over time in order to make effective teams. So I do a lot of interpersonal work so that people can communicate harmoniously on teams, set their own goals, manage their time, and do all the little things that add up to positive habits and good workplace cultures.
Oh, perfect. Do you want to tell me about the biggest challenge you faced, the 2020 pandemic?
I feel like I've overcome it somewhat, but trying to work out, I was very entrenched that what I do is in person. I'm reading body language, I'm doing interpersonal skills. How on earth do I do that online?
Yeah.
It hasn't been as bad as I thought, actually. There's a lot of really interesting stuff you can do with breakout rooms. You can still have vulnerable spaces. You can have quiet meditation. You can have movement if you get creative. So the biggest challenge, I guess, at my end, I worked out, okay, how can I deliver in that interactive way with the human element still there? The challenge I sometimes face is that I still get participants who log on wanting a webinar, and I'm like, no, talk to me. Like, actually tell me about yourselves. Fair enough, if you desperately only want to use the chat, that's fine, but actually this is a space for you to share. And it works better when people do. So I guess having in my training toolkit, okay, I'd like to do it in a participatory way, but if people are not up for that, how do I change it in the moment to suit what their expectations are?
Okay, perfect. Could you go through me the workflow you have with someone to kind of bring out their potential and help someone, kind of the process you go through with them?
Yeah. So the workflow is normally that a manager or a team leader will kind of contact me first, and they will say, I'm having this issue that I want resolved, such as we've got a public speaking event coming up and people aren't feeling confident, or we're having some low-level conflict and we want to do some work around that. So sometimes it's issue-based, or sometimes it's more goal-based of, okay, we're hosting this event and we want everybody to brush up on their networking skills. So there'll be an aim in mind, and that will lead to a conversation where I kind of say, okay, these are the kinds of activities I can offer. What are you, I guess, what's your focus? Is it, so just taking public speaking as an example, is it the speech writing, or is it body language? Is it the feeling of confidence? Is it audience engagement? And sometimes people might ask for one thing when really they need another. So I always have that conversation with a client to find out what their existing challenges are, what it is they'd like to get out of it, because that helps me to plan the training journey. And then I'll ask, those logistical questions of how many participants, how many hours worth of input do you want us to play around with? And from that, I'll then go away and do a bespoke training plan for that client. And then they'll normally set up all the kind of, here's the venue, here's the participants. I'll rock up and deliver the day. And then we have a lot of, the actual training is designed in such a way so that at the beginning, I often do what I call baseline activities. And that is a chance for the people in the room to see where they're already at. This is really, really important with some audiences who maybe didn't sign up for the training themselves, if they're being made to do it. So a fun one is when I do active listening skills. If I'm, especially with an older audience, and we say, right, we're going to train you how to listen, they kind of go, oh, We know how to listen. Like, I don't want any of that. And so what I might do is give them a game or a scenario where they get to practice listening skills, but I don't tell them that's what it's for. And we say, right, now that you've done that, how were your listening skills? And they go, oh, yeah, they weren't as good as we thought they were. Great, that's fine, because now I'm going to train you. And so that baseline activity, in a very non-threatening and supportive way, develops people's self-awareness of what they're already implementing and what the gaps are. Because I find a lot of what goes on in the world of training is you can train people in the knowledge and theories, you know, this is the model, this is what you should do. And people say, yes, I know that, but are they actually doing it? And that's the important bit in work teams. And so the scenario-based work helps them to see what they actually do, and then you can bridge the gap between knowledge and practice. And so a lot of what I will do from that point on is refresh models for those who maybe don't know, depending on what the topic is. So for instance, in conflict resolution, we might look at the negotiation process. So, you know, or in leadership, we might look at models of leadership styles. But alongside the theory, there is always practice. And that's a lot of practical scenarios where people can role play, or they can talk about their work environment, they can action plan. And that means that rather than just, okay, go away and think about this, no, you've actually done it, you've experienced it, and then you've got a more tangible idea of how to implement it. Sometimes I come back over multiple sessions, if that's what the clients ask for, to kind of do an evaluative process. You know, how did you get on implementing step one? Okay, now let's have the next bit. Other times people have me in for a one-off, and I recommend that the person who booked me follow up themselves to get that long-term behaviour change and attitude change.
I just want to just mention something. I've been to quite a few of these training courses, not for you, unfortunately, Gemma. And a lot of the time, it's, I'm putting myself in your own shoes. It's not easy because, for example, if you have 20 people doing a training course and the boss decides you have to, then you got 19 people who are not initially inclined to do it. Look, I'm just doing it because my boss asked me to. However, getting their attention and interest in the early stages of the beginning, it's massive. And it's not easy at all.
Yeah. And that's where the baseline thing helps, because then you can show them the value in getting it right or the issue with getting it wrong. So with listening, with conflict, with public speaking, quite often it's very obvious and emotive if their skills aren't what they'd like them to be. You know, if you say, right, we're public speaking day, come up, do a presentation right now. Whoa, I'm nervous, I can't possibly do that. Okay, that's because you need some practice, let's work on that. Or we'll do this game that I won't tell them it's a conflict game. I'll just say, oh, you've got a team activity, off you go. And they get into not too heated an argument, because I contain the space, but they get into enough of an argument that then when you stop, you say, right, how did that go? And they go, it was horrible. It's like, okay, so would you like it to not be horrible in future? How about you listen to the rest of, okay, this, and we'll go back to sometimes the same activity or a similar activity, having done the practice, to show the improvement. But there are always one or two people who struggle to engage because they really don't want to be there. But a lot of what's, I guess, what's called the pacing at the beginning, getting people interested, engaged, and to go at, you know, for me to go at the speed they're interested in, is that taking a baseline, setting expectations, and finding the value for them in what I'm offering.
I know, to my understanding, it's quite, you take on a lot of the workload at yourself for your business, don't you? I was wondering if you had any plans to bring any new employees in, or if you were going to keep it as kind of a single man thing?
For the moment, it's just me. And that seems to work out fine. I don't know really over the next couple of years whether I will expand or not. I guess it depends, A, on demand, and B, also a lot of the training's in my head. And I'd have to, because of the I mean, maybe it's a little bit not grand, but to me, the unique selling point is the approach. I know there's a lot of people who can outsource training very easily by saying, here you go, here's a PowerPoint, go and run that for a group. But because a lot of this is very interpersonal, I would need to hire somebody who understands the nuances of emotional intelligence and would do it in the way I want it. So I've worked with volunteers before, and back when I started, I came from the world of youth work, and there were about 8 of us who, if right now I was asked to do a huge event, there are people who I could bring in, but they've all got full-time jobs doing other things as well. So I think it's that balance between, at the moment, it's just me. If I had so much demand I needed another person, you know, it would have to be a full-time job's worth rather than part-time, because the people I've got in mind to bring into the role are already doing other things full-time and need a solid career.
And I can see you've got social media. Do you have any plans to expand it, and how helpful do you find it for business generation?
Who knows? I don't know about business. You're supposed to be doing it, so I am. I don't know about business generation as such. A lot of my leads come from people who already know me well and have been, you know, they knock on my door the same time every year to say, right, it's that time again, we've got a new cohort of graduates, or we've just started a new project. So a lot of my business comes from relationships. The social media is more for I guess the one-off events where I've been putting on my own programs for well-being. I've been trying to use social media to get that one out there. Mixed results, but it's, you know, who knows, it might be that somebody comes back in 6 months' time and says, oh, this post really stuck with me, or I've seen you for a while and now I'm ready. So you can't really judge in the moment as to whether it's paying off just yet.
And so we were talking earlier about kind of if you're taking other people, depending on how well the business is doing in a few years. Do you have any plans for where you want to see the business in 5 years?
I'd like to focus on well-being a lot more. I think I started in leadership and all the kind of soft skills that go with self-leadership. So, you know, setting your own goals, time management, and active listening, that kind of stuff. And I'm still very passionate about that. And what I realise is I always did that from a perspective of well-being. So I found that in my experience, when I've spoke to clients about leadership development, they've expected leadership and management to be very dry, to be very inhuman, and just, well, what's the model? What do I do? How do I handle increasing profits? How do I handle this team conflict? And they weren't doing the holistic approach, which is why some of my regulars prefer my approach, because it's got a very human factor to it. Since the pandemic, or rather just before the pandemic started, I was reading a lot of positive psychology stuff because it's of interest to me, where I did a psychology degree. And I realized actually there's a lot of scope now for people to say your, you know, mental health is massively important if you want to be effective in your work life, if you want to be a good leader, a good manager. And so I kind of dug into that and pulled together a load of tools that help with improving your happiness, improving your well-being. And so what I'd really like to be doing over the next few years is getting into workplaces to do culture change, to work with teams and do group coaching and training, where I'm going in on a regular basis, you know, maybe once a week, once a month, drip feeding. Okay, here are some tools. Let's try them out together. Let's see how they're going to improve the workplace culture, and then come back and review, right, how's that gone? Here's the next tool. Because I think there's a dire need for that, and that we're going to see the businesses that flourish are the ones that look after their teams. And not everybody knows how to go about looking after their teams, because there's that, people think it's intuitive, and people may assume, oh, well, I'll just do what my parents taught me, but you don't know what you don't know. So I think sometimes having an external provider to say, you know, here's some expertise in this area, here's what the research shows us, let's try it out, let's see, is very helpful, because there's a lot of stuff on social media, on the internet, about the things you're supposed to be doing for employee wellbeing that are sometimes not as beneficial as the internet would have you believe.
So you take on lots of different types of clients. I've seen there's universities, there's businesses, there's charities, whatever. How difficult do you find it to provide help to so many different types of clients?
It's not really difficult at all. People are people. They've still got the same basic needs, and the material doesn't change as much as you think. The only difficulty is in the marketing messaging, because if I go up to somebody and say, I'm going to give you the exact same program that I'd give a 12-year-old, they might think, what? You know, I'm not a 12-year-old. Yeah, but the skill's the same. Learning to listen is learning to listen. And actually 12-year-olds pick it up better than adults sometimes, because at least they have the self-awareness to know, oh, I don't know this, I need to learn it. But no, the working with different audiences is really, really nice, because if you take something like conflict resolution, the principles of what causes a conflict are the same. A person has unmet needs, it creates a challenging feeling, and they express that in an unhelpful way. That's the same for a toddler as it is for a CEO. Just how you package it and what examples you draw to mind so that person feels that you're empathizing with them is a slight difference. But because I've worked with so many groups, in my head, I've got a bank of examples to draw from, which I guess goes back to the other challenge of, bringing on a new team member. You'd need to have this repertoire of examples that would take time to develop. But it makes it quite nice, because then when I'm working with, say, training managers or, leaders in corporate, and they say, oh, actually, this has made me think about my relationship with my child. Can we talk about that? Yep. I do this with young people and children. I can go down that route. And having a range of different clients, I think, means that whoever you're working with, you can tell them about how the other groups get on, and it broadens their picture. It's really nice working with refugees and telling them that actually sometimes, they're performing just as well as the CEOs that I work with in some ways, and they kind of go, oh, cool, so right, okay, well, I can do something with that.
So having said that about lots of different types of clientele, is there any more kind of groups of people that you want to be able to reach in the future?
I'd like to do more work with young people again. At the moment, I work, the young people that I work with the most are university students, but back when I started, we were focusing more on college age. And in a previous life, I was a primary school teacher. I'm a very firm believer that the earlier you teach people self-leadership skills, the more effective they'll be. I work with adults who are struggling with how to express their needs, or how to coach, or how to listen. And you think, if they'd have had that 10 years ago, it would have changed their career. If they'd have had it since they were 10 years old, wow, what could they have done with that? So I'd like to work more with school-aged people, but schools are very difficult to get into. Parents are very hard to access as well, and children have got so much on their plate with exams and stuff that I suspect it's not realistic to aim for that market in the coming years. So I think I'll keep at the university age and the college age and see what happens from there. But I really would like there to be a big change in the education system to focus on personal skills rather than academia.
So just to clarify there, so by school age, do you mean like secondary school or primary school?
Oh, any.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone sort of 3 to 70 is,
Okay.
And I've done conference. I did a conference in Switzerland for 5 years where we did intergenerational workshops, and it is so much fun teaching a 4-year-old and a 60-year-old the same stuff because they learn from each other in just the most beautiful way.
So the leaders / managers and the employees of today, how can the self-leadership training help them? I
think the first thing is self-awareness. When you Daniel Goleman is a big name in the leadership community, and he talks about how emotional intelligence breaks down into 4 categories. And you have self-awareness, which is understanding what's going on within you, which you need before you can move on to stage 2, which is self-management, actually dealing with those feelings, behaviors, decisions. Then in step 3, you have social awareness, which is, okay, what's going on for other people in my organization? And the last step 4 is relationship management. And so many leadership programs jump straight to step 4, which is, how do I inspire others? How do I motivate them? How do I get them to bond? And they jump in at that stage without having done the pre-work of what's going on in me. What are my values? What are my triggers? What are my strengths and challenges? And actually my approach to training is for it to be very self-reflective. I very much believe in Gandhi's mantra, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And you can only be that change if you actually know what's going on for you. So yes, I provide content. It's very practical, it's theory-based, but that reflective angle lets people bring their whole selves to their leadership role, which is really important if you actually want to connect with your teams and create a real followership.
Now, I'm assuming that most of the stuff you did throughout 2020 was online.
Yes. Although I did do a couple of in-person things for some teachers who went, we're in school, come see us face to face.
Yeah, well, off of that, how were you, how prepared do you feel to be able to go back into the classrooms, wherever, to be able to go back to see people face to face?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, there's some activities I'll have to adapt a little bit. I'm very practical. So it's not unusual for me to teach people to juggle, was to be getting tangled up in string and doing a lot of close contact stuff. So I'll have to avoid that. But the other day I was working with some teachers down in London, and we did a couple of things that were very practical, where we were throwing bean bags and learning about coaching. We were doing what was it called? A friend of mine gave it a different name, which sounded more grown up, and I've forgotten what it is. But getting people to move around the room to create like a demographic scale of, okay, values, where do I agree, disagree, and things like that.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of that stuff is still possible now that people are just wearing, they wear masks. So yeah, the in-person stuff is still on the cards for people who want it, but I'm equally happy working online and having kind of screen sharing what I need to, but doing a lot of breakout rooms and doing a lot of active discussion, meditation, and movement via Zoom as well, just to keep people awake.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's amazing. I don't think I've got any more questions. Andrea, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, Andrea, Gemma, is there anything you would like to add onto the questions that we've just quite well?
Yeah, I'd quite like. I don't know if there's space, and it depends what kind of article you're doing. But I've over lockdown developed a program that I'd like to sort of shout about, if that's okay.
Yes,
yeah, love to hear about it.
So one of the things I developed is called the Tools for Happier Living program. And it's, as I was saying earlier, drawing on the positive psychology stuff and drawing together what I felt were 8 kind of key threads to helping people live happier lives. Because there's a lot of work now, I certainly find on LinkedIn, on social media, workplace well-being is filtered down to, okay, we'll just put a yoga session on, or we'll send you a hamper of thank you stuff. It's like, no, that's not really, that's nice, but that doesn't tick the well-being box. And actually people need a lot more education on what helps them to manage their feelings and help them to feel good. So the way it runs is that it's a blend of training and coaching. And so what I mean by that is, there's training in the sense that, okay, I'll teach them about a model, such as there's lots of different gratitude practices that have been scientifically shown to raise your happiness and reduce the number of depressive symptoms over a 6-month period. It's a fantastic bit of research, and it's such a simple activity where people, you know, record 3 happy things each day, or send a thank you note to a friend and give it to them. And there's a lot of proof of just how high impact this stuff is. But if you haven't heard of it, you wouldn't think to do it. So I'll tell them about the theory, and we'll kind of go over the research in a very accessible way. And then they'll do it live on Zoom. They'll create an action plan of, okay, when am I going to do this? Who am I going to do it with? And there's a coaching element, because in quite intimate groups of, say, 6 to 12 people, we then, you know, use the breakout rooms to say, right, what did that bring up for you? And people might say things like, you know, I find it hard to think of what's been good about the day because I'm so used to having to achieve things that I, you know, maybe I beat myself up, or working out who to thank. I feel a bit overwhelmed because I realize there's so many people that I'm not thanking. And so they get that space to share their vulnerabilities, to share their challenges in a supportive environment, and get that personalized input on, you know, what they could do next. And so each week we're doing different topics, such as what the neurotransmitters in the brain do to regulate mood and how we can change our daily habits to improve those. We look at some basic cognitive behavioral therapy models for changing self-talk. We look into the causes of stress on a theoretical side of things, but then people get to reflect on their own stresses and coping mechanisms, how they handle it, and how they might like to change that. We go into how to maintain your relationships, work-life balance, and finding a greater sense of purpose, which some people find a little bit overwhelming and think, no, I just want a job. But we actually talk about how can you find purpose in your job or in your, you know, in your personal life, because it contributes to a sense of happiness and meaning.
Gemma, is this aimed at anybody, or businesses, or schools? Who's this aimed for, or who would you like to aim it at?
So it's open in that people sign up. It's not delivered to a particular place. Most of the people who take part are professionals. So people generally working in offices tend to be the main uptake, but I have had some students come as well. And the way it works at the moment is that I'm running courses and people sign up and buy their own ticket. But if a workplace said, actually, we want it just for our team, that would be great. So I would like HR managers to say, we want a private one for our team, because I think that blend of getting the content and having the whole team talk to each other would really make a difference to workplace culture.
Sorry. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you was, could you send Tony a link about this new program as well?
I was going to say, yeah. Because I think that's the perfect kind of thing that I'd love to talk about in the article, if that's okay with you. So if you could send me a link and I can use that stuff to write about, that'd be perfect. Yeah,
lovely. And what I've been doing, because it's, I mean, I say relatively new, I developed it a year ago. And so now I've got a couple of cohorts worth of research statistics of people before and after. We measure their self-esteem levels. We measure what's called their locus of control, whether they believe things, you know, whether they believe that life just happens to them or they make things happen. And so those people who've come on the course so far have had about a 20% boost in their self-esteem, 20% more control, 6% happier. So there's measurable findings. There's a lot of testimonials on the website as well. And I've started to do taster sessions as well, so that people can sign up periodically. There's going to be one a month where people can come along, try out some tools and see how they feel about that coaching and training blend, because some people pop onto Zoom and they just want to have their camera off, not talk, just listen. So, I mean, they're more than welcome to come to the tasters, but to get the most out of the program, they need to do the, you know, the breakout rooms, the vulnerability bit. And so the taster gives them a chance to see how that feels for them and whether it's a good fit. So I'll send you details of those things so that any of that you want to pop on there.
It's amazing, thank you.
Gemma, I guess it's been a pleasure, and let's keep in touch, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and hopefully the sunshine where you are.